And joining us is economist Dr. Roger Hosein. A pleasant good evening to you, Dr. Hosein.
Good evening, Mikey.
Good evening indeed. I want to get right into the heart of it. You made it quite clear that as long as Indian businessman Naveen Jindal is clean and clear to conduct economic activity, we should accept his offer, his money. And let me ask you this. How important is getting this refinery back up and running to our economy?
Well, to me, it's very important. I have done some survey work in the fence line of Paria, and sales for many of the businesses that I interviewed fell by as much as 40%. Some businesses have closed down, some workers have moved out of the community. So the fence line has taken a serious blow, and I think that if the refinery could be reopened, it will help rekindle and revitalize the community for the collective benefit of all. So I think it's absolutely critical from an employment perspective, from a community development perspective, from a business development perspective, and from an economic development perspective holistically.
And you would say that the economic activity has fallen by at least 40%?
For some of the firms that I interviewed, they experienced a 40% fall in sales after the closure of the refinery.
Now, the thing about it is that I've had discussions with so many people on this issue, and let's make this clear. The refinery as it stands now is not going to be a turnkey operation. There's going to be, of course, there needs to be money pumped into it to get it back on track the way we remember it as far as functioning. Is that correct?
Well, that's a technical question, an engineering question, but as far as I understand, based on the engineers that I've spoken to, yes, it will take some time to bring the refinery back on stream fully.
And let me ask you, because there's been so much talk, we've had other people weigh in and say that the middle class in this country has been wiped out, the economy is stagnant, there has been very little growth. What are we missing out by not having this refinery up and running?
Well, we are missing out some export revenues from the sale of the refinery. We are missing out some employment opportunities by virtue of the workers that will work at the refinery. We are missing out on community sales by virtue of the shops and the businesses around the refinery that will sell the refinery workers. We are missing out on the engagement of the capital that is formed already in Point-a-Pier area at the refinery. It is now idle. We can bring it into use if it is reopened. So there are a number of gains as compared to 2019 or 2020 or 2021 or 2022 when the refinery was closed if we reopen the refinery. So I think we should back for opening the refinery, but we have to make sure, it is the right person and all its play and all those type of things.
Yeah, because I mean, if you don't read the fine print, many of that profit, even when you come to foreign investors, many of that profit may be leaving the shores of Trinidad and Tobago. So, I mean, if you're looking at a deal that is going to be beneficial to us, because when you look at what the finance minister has says that the projected revenue which this country could receive this year may be 51 billion to 3 billion less than the figure which was projected when the budget, the 2023-2024 budget was laid in Parliament last October. How fast and how important and serious is it when it comes to getting something going for this economy to start moving again?
It's very important. I mean, if you have a shortfall in fiscal revenues of about 9 billion, based upon the comments of the Minister of Finance, then you have significant gaps and you need to try to close those gaps. And one way to close those gaps is any dysfunctional or any dormant capital that is already invested you have. You need to try to activate it. You need to try to bring back on stream the steel mill, if possible, the refinery. You also need to look for new investments in areas that is not gas related. I mean, all we are talking about here is the refinery, but there are other areas of economic activity we can try to get income and revenues from.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at that, we've had these conversations so many times before as far as divesting, opening up markets, but all of that has come to just simply old talk. I mean, even today, when you look at the newspaper reports, there are millions of dollars owed to the Housing Development Agency from tenants who basically may not have the money to pay or for whatever reason are not paying. I mean, how, looking at the economy now, Dr. Hosein, and moving forward, the minister made it quite clear for the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to be more than just tightening our belt. What can be expected and what can be done?
Well, first to begin, I don't think this is something that is just 2 to 3 years. I think they should have started around 2014, 15, 16. So this is something that we know well. I don't know why you would say the minister would say that now, because this is well known and should have been emphasized almost 8, 9, 10 years ago. So that if it was only now said, that's a problem, because it was clear on the wall that we had a structural problem in terms of the gap between fiscal revenues and fiscal expenditures some time ago. And yes, we are making attempts to cut transfers and to raise property taxes and things, but at the end of the day, when you look at the transfers, it's still at about 32 billion out of about 52 billion in government expenditures. So it's a lot. And we need our transfers and subsidies is about 3 times the regional average, if I remember correctly. And so we need to get our act together, and when we talk about making changes, we need to execute on the changes and start to raise more fiscal revenues, whilst at the same point in time cutting government expenditure where we can. I mean, some of our state-owned enterprises, they borrow heavily. They are dependent on the government for transfers to survive. And we need to get our act together in that regard and run the economy on a leaner fiscal situation.
Yeah, I want to thank you for, of course, bringing that perspective from an economic perspective. Unfortunately, what we are seeing here now is that the fact that government is trying to be a lot more politically attractive going into the election year. So some of these cuts that are necessary, and I agree with you, may not be on the priority list for the government. And if that be the case, do we have a price to pay for not making these strong and hard decisions?
Well, I think the government would make all the cuts that they said. I don't see why they would not make the cuts I mentioned there. I just think they are taking long, but we have no choice. We have to go ahead and make changes.
And you believe it must, that it's a must, it has to be done?
Yes, listen, look at the state of the economy. We have $140 billion in debt. I mean, what do you want it to go to? 200 billion? We have to start to make the changes now. The economy is crawling along in terms of economic growth. What do we want to do? Let it stop? No, we need to make these hard and serious structural adjustments, fix the economy, give it a fighting chance like the NAO did way back in 1986 in terms of making the hard structural and fiscal decisions, and give the economy a clean, solid pathway on which to go. Yes, there would be some job losses. Yes, there would be some changes. But what do you expect when the production of gas falls from 4,400 to about 2,400 or 2,500, almost 2,000 less? You must make sharp changes, and the longer we take to make it, it will be the sharper the changes required later on. So I think the state needs to intervene more consistently in a more organized, rhythmic format so that we get the economy back in a lean fiscal position and start to see returns to the fiscal changes within the shortest time period in the future.
Okay. Now, some folks have been calling for this, but the finance minister has made it clear that the government has no intention to devalue the dollar. He said that would cause tremendous hardship for the poor people in the population who have to buy food and other
no intention to do what?
No intention of devaluing the dollar.
No, but even if we don't devalue the dollar, I mean, in many regards, from what I hear, business people say, most business people have already started to operate at about $8 to 1. So the dollar has been, in principle, devalued in terms of operational cost. when you can get foreign exchange, and if you could get it elsewhere or from private individuals at 8 to 1, what would you do? Leave your business empty? You would buy it, and basically, and those cash costs are already passed on to the consumer. So it's a tricky situation. So yes, you may not want to devalue, but there are other changes you have to make in order to try to put the economy on a more stable pathway. You can't wait for the stock of reserves to completely disappear. The relationship between reserves and external debt is getting closer and closer. So we have some decisions to make.
And let me ask you this final question, Dr. Hosein. On a scale to 1 to 10, how far behind are we?
How far behind in what?
In basically trying to rejuvenate our economy and restore consumer confidence.
Well, if I am to use the murder level as a proxy for, or in terms of how the murder level, in my personal opinion, impacts upon consumer and business confidence, if I may add it, I would say it would be low now because this index that I'm using is very high. I mean, we are in the top 10 per capita in the world, so that there is considerable room for state involvement to reduce the murder level via drastic action. I mean, I am at the point where I think a limited state of emergency and curfew in some areas to take some of the guns off the street is definitely needed. Others may disagree, that's my personal view. But I think there is substantive scope for improvement. And I am hoping as it's an election year, you will see much tougher on crime and on murders. It does the country no good to have a murder level. I think it's 294 I saw on DJ Sheriff today.
Yeah.
Let's call it 300 by 2 is 600. That means we will be in the top 10 per capita in the world again. Now, what good will that do to Trinidad and Tobago? I can't see that doing any good. So we need some tougher action.
Dr. Hosein, I want to thank you so much for taking time out. I know you have a busy schedule. I want to thank you so much again. You have been very enlightening and straight to the point. We will be checking in with you periodically. Best of luck to you and your entire team. Keep up the good work.